All right, today we are digging into one of the most famous, or maybe infamous, stories in psychology, the Stanford Prison Experiment. You've probably heard about it, right? It's this wild tale of good people turning evil that's been in textbooks and movies for decades. But I'm going to let you in on a secret. The story you think you know, well, it isn't the whole story. Not even close.
So let's just jump right in with a question that's going to flip this whole thing on its head. What if the big lesson we all learned from this study, that good people can just snap and become evil, what if that's not just a little bit wrong, but actually dangerously misleading?
To get there, we first have to talk about the myth itself, the story that became this icon of pop psychology. It's a really simple, powerful story all about how the situation you're in can completely overwhelm who you are. And this was the takeaway, the soundbite that made it famous. It's so simple, so elegant, and honestly, pretty terrifying. The idea was that your character, your morals, everything you think you are, could just be stripped away by putting you in a uniform and giving you a role. You put a good person in a bad place, and boom, they become bad.
And when you look at the timeline, it seems to prove the point perfectly, doesn't it? I mean, look how fast everything just fell apart. Day 1 is fine. By day 2, you've got a full-blown prisoner rebellion. Day 3, the abuse is already escalating. And by day 6, the whole thing had to be shut down, even though it was supposed to last 2 weeks. On the surface, yeah, this looks like slam-dunk proof of the situation's power.
Okay, but this is where that nice, neat story starts to crumble. Because when researchers started digging into the archives, decades later, they found some, let's just say, major cracks in the whole foundation of this experiment.
Starting around the 2010s, this wave of criticism just blew the whole thing open. People pointed out that the methodology was, frankly, a mess. The ad they used to get participants might have actually attracted people who were more aggressive to begin with. But the biggest one, the real bombshell, was the evidence of direct influence from the researchers themselves.
And this quote right here, this is the smoking gun. Researchers found old audio recordings of the orientation, and guess what? The guards weren't just left to their own devices. They were coached. They were told in no uncertain terms that they needed to be tough. This wasn't some passive observation of human nature unfolding. Nope, it was active instruction.
And this brings us to a really crucial idea in psychology called demand characteristics. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It just means the participants, in this case the guards, weren't spontaneously turning into monsters. It's way more likely they were picking up on all these cues and just acting out the role they thought the experimenters wanted to see. They weren't just being guards, they were being good subjects, delivering the results they were basically being asked for. So, if the science is so shaky, why on earth is the Stanford Prison Experiment still one of the most famous studies ever? Well, that's where we get into this fascinating battle between scientific validity and just a really good story.
This really gets to the heart of the whole thing. On one side, you have the scientific reality. This experiment's methods are a mess, and we can't trust the results. But on the other side, you have this incredibly viral narrative. It's a parable that's super easy to understand, and it tells us something really profound and a little scary about ourselves. And for decades, the power of that story just completely steamrolled the science. But here's the twist. Ironically, the experiment's greatest failures actually led to its most important and lasting contribution. It didn't just teach us a lesson about bad science, it helped us build a brand new foundation for good science.
The absolute ethical nightmare of the Stanford Prison Experiment, along with other studies like the Milgram obedience experiments, served as a massive wake-up call for the entire field. It led directly to the strict ethical codes we have today that protect people in studies. Things we totally take for granted now, like being truly informed about what you're signing up for, having the absolute right to leave at any time, and having independent boards review research. All of that was basically born from the ashes of these controversial experiments. So now that we've pulled back the curtain on the myth and we understand the history, what should we actually take away from the Stanford Prison Experiment today in 2025?
The real lesson here isn't some simple, spooky saying about good people turning evil. It's something much more valuable, and honestly, a lot more empowering. The true legacy of this whole saga is about the absolute, non-negotiable importance of critical thinking.
Really, the big takeaway is to use this story as a kind of mental toolkit. The next time you hear a super compelling story that just feels right, that confirms something you already believe, take a second, pause, question it. Always ask about the methods. Get good at separating a catchy story from solid science. Because it's a shared responsibility, right? Researchers have to be ethical for sure, but all of us have to be critical consumers of the information we're fed.
And that leaves us with one last pretty challenging question for you.
We've seen that direct instruction from an authority figure, not just the situation, can make people do terrible things. It's a lot like those Milgram experiments where people kept giving what they thought were painful electric shocks just because a guy in a lab coat told them to. So knowing that, be really honest with yourself. If you were dropped into a situation like this, what role do you think you would really play? The prisoner who just endures it? The guard who follows instructions? Or maybe, just maybe, the person who stands up and says, "No, this is wrong"? It's something to think about.